Congratulations, everyone. It is now my pleasure to introduce our main speaker, Tim Kay from Pacific Group LA. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's Tim, and I'm an alcoholic. Actually, from Ventura, right down the road here. I want to thank Scott for asking me to come share with you tonight, especially since my daughter and her husband and my two grandkids, who are 2 and 4, are at my house right now. It's given me a little respite from the chaos that's going on over there. Anyway, I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to be sober. I also want to thank my sponsor, Bob, for being here tonight with me. Bob is he's a man of honor and integrity, and he's about as good an example of a sober man that I've ever known in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's really a privilege to have you here, and I'm so happy you're in my life. There's almost nothing that Bob wouldn't do for me, including missing the Dodger game tonight. I also want to acknowledge Bruce and Lynn. Lynn was my wife Nancy's sponsor in Al-Anon for years, and we owe her a great debt of gratitude for what she's done for my family and for keeping my wife on the straight and narrow for all those years. I also want to thank welcome the out-of-towners for being here. Especially want to thank Ronnie, who's sitting back there from New York. I appreciate you traveling all this way, Ronnie, to hear me talk. I love New York. I spent a great deal of time of my life in the New York metropolitan area, and it gives me my edge. I think New York gives me my edge. Anyway, I've been sober since November 16th, 1985, which was it Gary? Had 50 years? Yeah. And by Gary's standard, I'm still a newcomer, but it's impressive, Gary. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to all the birthday folks. It just means, one of the things that means, I've been around here for a long time. It also means I'm getting a little bit older. And one thing you learn when you get older, you realize that, kind of the world goes on without you, especially in people who are a little bit younger. And I've learned that there's a different language that's spoken sometimes with younger people. And I'll tell you what I mean. I sponsor a guy, and he sponsors a lot of young men. And he invited me. He does a weekly meeting with the young men that he sponsors. And he invited me over to his house to join their meeting. And everybody was sitting around in a circle. I guess it was a Tuesday evening. And going around the room and, taking turns sharing. Everybody got an opportunity to share. And it came to this one kid, he's a young man. And he identified himself, and he said, when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, he said, I thought all of you were lame. And maybe I was just being a little too sensitive, but it appeared to me that he was looking right at me when he said that. And he said, but then, after being around here for a little while, I realized that you guys were savage. Well, I didn't really know what that meant, and I'm sure the younger folks in the room know that, but if you're, from my generation, you don't know what that means. That's actually a good thing. We're we're savage. That's a really great thing. So, just so you know, here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're savage. I think that's dope. Anyway, I grew up in a family. My dad was a Lutheran minister, and my mother was the dutiful minister's wife, and she relished being in that role. I had a older sister, Karen, and a younger sister, Kristen. And the thing that was a little bit unusual about our family, other than the fact that my father was a minister, was that my younger sister, Kristen, had cerebral palsy, and she was severely handicapped. And, I grew up in a family that was, was centered around the church, and it was a loving safe environment. But it turned out, it became apparent by the time I was about 9 years old or so, that my dad was a chronic alcoholic. And the disease of alcoholism doesn't care who you are, where you come from, what you do, what your race is, who you believe in, what your sexual orientation is. Alcoholism does not care. And my dad ended up, being, he was like a rising star in the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church. I mean, he was charismatic, and he was handsome, and he was a great speaker, and people they just loved my dad. And yet he ended up on Skid Row in Rochester, New York. And, and I love my dad, and when he disappeared, it was crushing for me. And it just seemed like once my dad he just vanished as far as I was concerned. He was just gone. And it seemed like once he was gone, that tragedy just seemed to befall my family. And my little sister got very sick after prolonged illness. She passed away, and we had a number of close family members pass away within a short period of time, and my mother would get remarried and divorced, and it was just a never-ending series of things that really a child should never have to go through, honestly. That's what it was like. And to this day, I still, if I'm laying in bed and the phone rings, my heart jumps. I still, after all these years later, it still has that effect on me. But I'll tell you this, most of my life before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had these feelings that just seemed to just eat me alive inside. I felt inadequate, and I wanted other people's approval, and I felt overly self-conscious, and I was just inadequate and just terribly afraid. I don't even know what I was afraid of, but I just had this fear just gnawing inside me, and I was alone. I just felt alone. And honestly, I could not at that time have told you any kind of definition of any of those feelings. They were all just overwhelming for me. It was just an overwhelming sense of just all of these feelings. And I knew that there was something wrong with me. I just didn't know what it was. And it seemed to me that it was all the result of the things that had happened to me in my childhood. And I felt very much like a victim. And I used that idea of feeling like a victim to what I thought was my advantage for a long time, without realizing really where those feelings were coming from. I didn't realize that when I looked at myself as a victim, that I was not able to take responsibility for anything in my life. And if I wasn't willing to take responsibility or didn't recognize my responsibility of anything in my life, I was never going to be empowered to change anything. Nothing. And it was really a long time before I realized what the dynamic was that was going on with me. Because it turns out that I just have this innate ability to be completely and totally self-centered. I can just shut out the world. I can drive 100 miles and not even realize where I am and what I'm doing. I could just shut everything down. And the thing is that I don't have the ability to recognize that self-centeredness. I'm in it. I can't see it. I have no idea that that's what's going on. And when I get like that, what happens is I don't have the capacity then to interact with you, to be able to integrate with the experiences that are going on around me. I don't have that ability. And so I become isolated. And when I become isolated like that, I lose perspective. That's what happens. I need you. I need to have some interaction with you to have some understanding of who I am and where I fit in. And without that, I'm a lost soul. I am a lost soul seeing no possible way out. The one way that I learned that I could escape that was to drink alcohol. Because you see, when I take a drink, that dynamic completely changes, almost instantly. It alters my perception of reality. That's what alcohol does for me. And all those feelings just seem to melt away. They just do. All of a sudden, I feel connected to you. I feel a part of. I feel like I'm one of the guys. I just feel like I am part of the experiences going around. I feel loved again. I just feel like life has some kind of meaning for me all of a sudden. And I didn't realize that any of this was going on. I didn't realize that that's what alcohol was doing for me. And I really believe that effect produced by alcohol is the best definition of alcoholism that I know of. I mean, I don't really think it matters that much how much you drank. I mean, some of us drink our way onto Skid Row, and some of us are just, in a bathrobe and slippers. And it doesn't really matter. What matters is what is the effect produced by alcohol. And that was the effect that was produced for me. I started to drink at a young age. I was 13 years old. And, I didn't feel young. I thought I was pretty grown up by then. I'd been through a lot, and I felt like I was pretty grown up. And, man, you look at a 13-year-old now, and you realize it's just a child. I mean, it was just a child. My first drunk, I remember very well. It was not, a lot of people, their first drunk is, they went to a party with some friends and, that kind of thing, and they had their first drink, and they were put at ease socially. That was not my experience. My first drunk was I was alone in the family kitchen by myself. And that's really who I am, if you want to know. I mean, that is really who I am. That's how I like to drink. And I remember that night. It's not like, I took a drink and I had, all this clarity came to me of what alcohol was doing to me. All I knew was it felt good. It felt good. To me, I thought alcohol had the same effect on anybody who drank. I didn't, when all you have the capacity to do is think of yourself, you think everybody has the same experience that you do. So I just assumed that alcohol had the same effect on everybody. And I started to drink on the weekends with my friends as I went through high school and got into college. I had moved around a lot because of our family situation. I had counted one time, I moved 21 times by the time I was 18 years old. So there was a lot of inconsistency in my life. And I went to college, and it was the first time I had been in one place for 4 years. And I was able to stay there and graduate from there. One thing about when you go to college, they ask you to declare a major. And I had a hard time with that because I really wanted other people's approval of what my major was going to be. And I wasn't sure what everybody wanted me to do. And so I just decided that the school I went to was a liberal arts school, and they allowed you to develop your own major. It's called an independent major. And that seemed to suit me. I thought, I just have someone of my intellect can't really be limited by one discipline. You know what I mean? And so I made up my own major is really what it amounted to. And my major was called Social Change Through Human Forms of Expression. If anybody knows what that means, perhaps you could tell me what it does after the meeting, because I have no idea. But you might recognize that there's probably not a lot of jobs in that field. And I graduated with that. And when you have a major like that after college, you end up in a place like Crested Butte, Colorado, which is where I ended up as a ski resort town in the mountains. And I got there, I was going to visit a friend of mine for a weekend, and I ended up staying there for 4 years. And it just didn't really, everything that mattered to me was in a backpack I had with me. And, that's all. I slept on people's floors when I first got there. I got there in late February, the beginning of March, and got a little job right away working for this guy, George, and he was building a house outside of town, and I was just kind of a laborer out there and helped him with his construction work and had my drinking money and, just kind of living day to day. I mean, the idea of living one day at a time was not new to me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been doing that a long time. And, and it was great. I mean, I was just, sleeping on the floor, sleeping on people's couches, sleeping with whoever. I mean, it just kind of made my way around the town. And, Crested Butte at that time, it was, if you're ever wondering where all the hippies ended up, they went to Crested Butte. That's where they went. And it was like that kind of environment. It was great. I mean, it was just, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But they have what's called mud season in these ski resort towns. And when mud season comes, everybody leaves. The ski area shuts down, the work disappears, and everybody just kind of leaves. And as I said, I was living one day at a time. I didn't save up any money to go on a trip to Belize or anything like that. I was like, hey, it was kind of like, hey guys, where's everybody going? I just like, oh my, what am I going to do? And but a guy was nice enough to let me house sit for him, and I moved into this house and got on food stamps and got the blocks of government cheese. And but we really are resourceful people. I didn't have any money, but we figure it out, and I managed to get drunk every single night somehow, even though there was no work and a lot of the bars were closed down and most of the liquor stores were closed down in this little town. But we just figure it out. We just do. Anyway, I was there for, I don't know, maybe a month or so, and then the guy who owned the house that I was house sitting came back. And I don't know what you think about that, but it was a hell of an inconvenience for me. And I thought, what am I going to do? And, I just had this other thing going on with me. Like, I just never felt like a man inside. I didn't really know what made a man tick. I didn't know what that was all about. And I wanted to do something really manly. So I gave it a lot of thought. And I decided what I was going to do is I was going to get a tarp and set it up between a couple of trees, like a lean-to. You know what I mean? And put like pine boughs underneath there and live out in the woods. Used to say like Grizzly Adams. Nobody even knows who Grizzly Adams is anymore. But it's like the show Alone. Okay, that's what it is. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be like that. I thought, that's something a man would do. Maybe a stupid man, but a man nonetheless. And so I was out one night on a date with Darlene, and I wanted to impress her. And so I told her, I got to move out of this house. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to set up a tarp between a couple of trees. That did not impress her, by the way. And, it's just one of those things where as it came out of my mouth, I realized, and this has happened to me many times, where I have an idea and I just haven't really thought it all the way through. And then as soon as I start telling somebody else the idea, I realize it's not really that good an idea. And that's the experience I had as this was coming out of my mouth to Darlene, and she said, she can't live under a tarp. She said, it's 9,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains. And I'm like, well, I can. And she's like, no, she said, I tell you what, she said, I have a teepee and you can use it instead. Well, when you're looking at living under a tarp, a teepee sounds like a pretty damn good thing. And I had studied American Indian religion when I was in college. And so I knew something about this, and I had some real ideas about, I thought, I get grandiose ideas about stuff. I think, I'm going to set up that teepee next to the Slate River, and I'm going to, catch fish out of that river and cook them over an open fire, and, I'm going to get healthy out there. You know what I mean? I'm going to stop drinking and stop using and stop smoking cigarettes, and, the deer will come eat out of my hand, and I will befriend the bear, and the women are going to come flocking out there to Tim's teepee for sure. And I put shag carpeting in there, and I had high hopes for that teepee, and none of those things happened. I didn't set up the teepee right. You're supposed to, when you set up a teepee, there's the poles, and you're supposed to scrape the bark off the poles so that when it rains, the water runs down the poles. If you don't do that, the water collects on the edges of the bark, and it rains in your teepee. Well, I mean, who can be bothered with things like that, And I didn't scrape the poles, and it was like the rainiest summer in decades in Colorado, and it was miserable. It was miserable. And my dog Blaze and I are out there, and I'm drinking gallons of cheap wine, just thinking, how did this happen again? It was such things just don't work out for me. They never work out for me. I don't get it. I don't understand it, And across the river from me was a guy, and he had his teepee. It was like twice the size of mine, and it was on a wood platform, and he had a wood-burning stove in the teepee. And he'd just walk around there just all dry and warm, and I'd just scowl at that guy. I hated that guy. And anyway, I ended up moving back inside. And the other thing is I realized, I was in Crescent View probably 9 or 10 months, and I didn't have an address. Another term for that is homeless. And that's what I was. I was homeless. And, my poor mother, who had been through so much, she didn't know where I was. I never even had the courtesy there was no cell phones or anything back then. She had no way to contact me. She didn't know if I was dead or alive. And, what a selfish way to live, to just not even acknowledge her or think of her, or having any consideration. Anyway, I ended up moving back inside, as I said. And I had done a lot of different jobs. I worked as a logger, and I shoveled snow, and I worked in construction, and I ran a kids program. And, when you live in towns like that, you just do whatever you have to do to get by. And then finally I got a job tending bar. And I had learned how to tend bar when I was in college. That's how I worked my way through. And, when I got that bartending job, everything changed. I started to just, I'd get to work at about 4 o'clock, and I'd start drinking. And then I would drink all through the shift. And then when things shut down, we would drink with all the other bar people, any of the waitresses and bartenders, and we'd all get together, and we'd be up all night, every night. The goal of the day was, just try to get to bed before the sun came up. And so many days I'd see that sun creeping up, and I think, God, I did it again. How'd I do this again? I did it again. I was thinking the other day, to me, I don't know about you, but when I've been up all night and it's 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm drinking, that's not morning drinking. That's the night before drinking. Yeah. And I would, I'd go to bed and pass out, sleep most of the day, and I'd wake up, and the first thing I would do would just throw up my own liver bottle. That's what I would do. And my hands were just shaking, and my legs would just pound the bed involuntarily while I slept at night. My skin was just crawling. I was losing weight. I couldn't keep food down. I was passing blood. It was, the first thing I would do when I woke up was I always had to have something from the night before and just take a swig of something. And it would come right back up. And I could feel my body rejecting the alcohol. It was clear to me. My body was like, no. And I would take another drink, and it would come back up, and I would take another drink until something stayed down. And it really went way beyond any idea of just trying to be, connected to other people and feeling good. This is literally, survival for the next 10 minutes. That's what it was. I got to get through the next 10 minutes. And my whole orientation around life just became, where was I going to get that next drink? Where is it going to come from? And when you drink like that, just bad things happen to you. And what I remember more than anything are those things that happened to me physically. And in that state, in the summer of 1985, I moved to Southern California because that's where my mother was. That's where us tough guys go. When the going gets tough, us tough guys go live with their moms. And I've sponsored a lot of them over the years. I guarantee you that's what happens. Anyway, I moved in with my mother, and after a short period of time, at the age of 26 years old, my liver just completely shut down. Just shut down, stopped working. And ended up in the hospital as a very sick young man. And I was in that hospital for about 3 days, and the doctors would come in and they'd say, we don't really know what's wrong with you. We know what caused it. And we know that if you continue to drink, you'll most certainly die. And I remember just looking, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. Because I couldn't imagine life without drinking. Everything I did in life was associated with taking a drink first, and I just couldn't imagine it. And I was in there for about 3 days, and my stepfather came in to visit me, and we were talking about the Dodgers, and I was looking out the window, and it just came to me. I just said, I'm an alcoholic. And it was nothing that I had been wrestling with. I wasn't struggling with that idea. It just came out of my mouth. And he said, "Can you look me in the eye and say that?" And I said, "I'm an alcoholic." In that instant, that complete obsession and compulsion to drink was lifted from me. And I can't describe that to you in any other way than to say that that was a powerful spiritual experience. It's the only way to describe it. I don't know where it came from. And I think that's the only way I could have gotten sober, honestly. I admire people who walk in here of their own volition, seeking help, because I don't have that kind of courage. I don't have that kind of backbone. I just never would have done it. I would have just rather drink myself to death. Anyway, I went to a 28-day AA boot camp, I'd call it. It was run by a guy that had been in the Marine Corps, and I got out of there, and through a series of events, as a leader mentioned, I ended up in the Pacific Group, and it was just the place for me. I was so lost. I needed to be told what to do. I didn't know the littlest thing about myself. Everything about me was just in this haze. It was all fake. There was nothing authentic about me. I didn't know the littlest things about myself. And I didn't know whether to put my socks on first or my t-shirt. I didn't know what to do. And I got a sponsor, and my sponsor gave me a series of directions that seemed to have absolutely nothing to do with what my problems were. None. I'd been going to 3 meetings of AA a day, and I was getting crazier and crazier. And I got this sponsor, and the first thing he told me was, he said, "I want you to go to a meeting every night, I want you to call me every day, and I want you to get a job." And I did. I did those things because I didn't know what else to do. And slowly my life started to change imperceptibly. I didn't even realize what was going on. My sponsor was walking me through these 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous without me even realizing it. I didn't even know that that's what we were doing. But these spiritual principles that are outlined in these 12 steps are a program of action. And he took me through what I thought were the 12 steps, and I was waiting for my moment, right? Okay, I'm done with them, so let's go. And it didn't happen. I didn't have that moment. I didn't have some kind of magnificent spiritual awakening. I didn't. Not that I would have even known what a spiritual awakening was. I didn't even know what one was, but I didn't have that moment. I thought, well, maybe I got to do them again. I'm going to have to do them again. But finally I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to just keep doing what I'm doing. And my life started to improve and get better. And, I started a new career. I went from, working in the warehouse to working my way up the order desk and sales manager, and then a new career. It started to make more money, and then I got married and bought a house, and we had cars, and I was doing everything in AA that you could imagine, and it was all good, right? It was all good, but there was something that was missing, and I didn't really know what it was. I knew that sponsorship and working with others, that 12th step was so important, but I didn't get it. I thought, well, I got a good life going on here. How come nobody's asking me to sponsor them, And I just thought, well, there's just people in AA that are good with working with new people, and then there's those that aren't. And I'm just one of the aren'ts, I once had a guy ask me to sponsor him right before the meeting started, and he was gone at the break. But I had an experience happen. I had been on the 12-step call list of central office for many years, and they'd never gotten a call. And then one night, on a Thursday night, I got a call, and it was late. It was about 10:30 at night. It was this central office call, and they said, "Can you give this guy Jim a call?" And I said, "Sure." I've been told to say yes, so I called him. I didn't know what I was going to say to him, but I called him up, and he was drunk, and I asked him if he, wanted to get sober, and he said yes. And I said, well, here's my home number, here's my work number, and here's my pager number. For you young folks, a pager is this. Anyway, I thought I was being clever. I asked him to read the numbers back to me, and he did. And the next day came and went, and no call from Jim. I'm like, well, I probably said the wrong thing, you know. I don't know how to handle these things. Anyway, so I went about my day. I went to a meeting that night. Friday night, 10:30, the phone rings, and it's Jim. And we have the same conversation we had the night before, except this time I got smart. I said, well, Jim, where do you live? And he told me. And I said, well, I'll be by to pick you up for a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous tomorrow night. And I went by his house on a Saturday night, little house in Culver City, and I got there and knocked on the door, and his father let me in, and he just dismissed me into the living room and walked away. You know, he just was disgusted with the whole thing. And I walked into the living room. It was a small, dimly lit room, and there was a lot of, you know, it was like red crushed velvet furniture in there and fringe hanging down from the lamps and stuff. And but the most startling feature of the room was his mother collected dolls. And there were dolls on shelves, floor to ceiling, all the way around the room. And let me tell you something, that's really creepy when you walk in a room like that. And I sat down in a chair, and there was Jim in this big stuffed chair, and he's sitting there like this, and he had on a pair of overalls and no shirt, and one pant leg was ripped from the hip on down. There was dried blood run down his leg, and he had a black eye, and his nose was swollen, a fat lip, and a chipped tooth, and he had taken a purple bandana, and he just draped it over his head, and he was looking out at me like this, and he had taken a razor blade, and he just carved up his arm, which is hundreds of cuts up one side down the other of his arms. And he later told me he had done that because he wanted people to think he was crazy. Yeah, that worked. And I looked at him, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to say to this guy? And I said, Jim, how you doing? He said, not too good. And anyway, I got him cleaned up, and I took him to a meeting that night. I took him to a meeting every night for the next week. And I was investing in Jim, and I wanted Jim to stay sober. This guy was going to stay sober. And I told him to do everything I was told to do, and he was doing everything. And then one morning, his mother called me up, and she said, I'm just calling to tell you that Jim's drunk. Saturday morning. And I thought, okay, I'll be right over. And on the way over there, you know, part of me is thinking, that son of a bitch. I mean, honestly, I really inconvenienced myself for him. And he got drunk. You know, and the other part of me is saying, well, of course he got drunk. You were sponsoring him. You probably said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing. I mean, I was animated by the time I got there. And I knocked on the door again. His dad this time pointed me down the hallway to his bedroom. And I opened the door to Jim's bedroom and just stopped dead in my tracks. Because there was Jim, and he was laying on the floor in his own urine and his own vomit, wrapped up tight in this old woolen blanket, empty bottle of Thunderbird laying tipped over next to him. And Jim was passed out drunk. And I looked at him, and I got the chill that I get every time I tell the story as I stood there and I looked at Jim, because I realized that's me. That's me. That's why we're sitting in this church on a Saturday night, so maybe we can get through one more day without taking a drink. And that's it. That's our common bond. That's what ties us together. That's why this idea of the singleness of purpose is so critical. It's so important. You know, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I just couldn't interact with anybody. I was so uncomfortable sitting in AA meetings, but I could listen to the speakers, and I identified with what they were saying. And that allowed me to keep coming back. And I'll tell you, that experience with Jim, the other thing I realized as I stood there and looked at him was I felt compassion for this man. I felt compassion. And that's what was missing from me. I had the ability to look at him and see where he was and identify with him and felt, what could I do to help this man? And from that point to this, I've been able to sponsor men in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's become a very important part of my life. These guys call me all day long, and they allow me the privilege of participating in everything that their lives have to offer. You know, when something good happens in their life, generally I'm the first call that they make. They want to share it with me. They want to tell me the good news. And they've told me about the difficult things too. I mean, for everything from a hangnail, literally a hangnail, to the loss of a child. And what an honor it is to share this life with him. There's one guy that I sponsor, and he called me a few years ago, some years ago now, probably 7 or 8 years ago. And he called me, and he was as distressed as anybody I've ever heard. And he told me that his wife had just been taken by ambulance to the hospital. And they had 3 young children, 3 children under the age of 5. And so my wife and I jumped in the car. We met him at the hospital. It was at Tarzana Hospital. And we were all sitting outside under the shade structure waiting for news on her, what would happen with her. And finally a doctor came out after an hour or two, and he said, we can have one person come in, only one. And the guy's sponsor was just too ruined. He couldn't do it. And he asked me if I would go in. And I walked into that hospital, into that emergency room, in the bay that she was in. And there was a doctor in there that was frantically working on her. Usually doctors keep their cool, but they knew that she had these children at home. And man, he was frantically working on her. And I said, what's her status? And he said, I'm going to be honest with you. He said, she's probably not going to make it. And if she does, she's going to be a vegetable. And I held her hand, and it was cold. I walked out of that room a few moments later, and I'm thinking as I'm walking back to this man and his family and his friends, I'm thinking, what am I going to say to them? What am I going to say to them? And I wanted to give them some hope. So I tried to deliver something realistic, but still have a message of hope. And that hospital was able to keep her alive for about 24 hours. And then they transferred her to UCLA. And I went to see her at UCLA, and I checked in, and they said she's in ICU, which I totally expected. And I went up to the ICU ward, and I walked towards her room, not expecting, just expecting the worst when I walked in there. And I walked in there, and there she was. She had her eyes closed, and she must have heard me come through the door, because all of a sudden she just opened her eyes, and she said, "Hi, Tim." Those doctors there had figured out what was wrong with her, and they saved her life. They saved her life. And so when I tell you that them sharing their lives with me has enriched my life, that is just one of many stories, but that's what has happened. And it's become so important to me because, you know, my wife Nancy and I we just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary. And we've been together a long time, and we've raised 3 children. And there was a period in my sobriety where, we had these 3 kids, and I was working 10 hours a day, and we had the house to take care of. And I mean, life was full, and it was busy, and I had every reason in the world to walk away from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've seen it happen. But you see, those men that I sponsored, I felt an obligation to them. I needed to show up for them. I needed to set an example for them. They were like gravity, pulling me right back into the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what a difference that has made. I always heard people talk a lot about God and about love and Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm just not one of those guys that gets up in front of a bunch of people and starts talking about God and love. And yet I've heard some pretty tough guys get up at the podium over the years and talk about those things. And I didn't talk about it because I didn't really get it. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I was just missing it. And then I came to understand over the years that, when we talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous, when I was new, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I didn't have any money. And the people of Alcoholics Anonymous took me in my home group. They put me up on their couch, and they made sure that I was fed. They even helped me get a job. I mean, they really looked out for me. My wife and I got married. Many of them celebrated with us that day. And when we bought our first house, they helped us move in. And they've been there, when my mother passed away. Well over 100 people in my home group went from West Los Angeles to Westlake Village in the middle of the day, on a weekday, to attend the services of a woman most of them had never met. Well, that's love. That's love. That's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a love for each other. We don't always like each other, but we have a love for each other that we'll do for each other. That's what commitments are about. Whether you're making coffee or setting up the meeting or cleaning up afterwards, it's love. That's how we love each other in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what we do. And when there's love like that, there's the undeniable presence of God. And so I learned that God was not an abstraction. I always thought, I was brought up in the church, and I remember as a kid, I would stare at the cross and the crucifix and see if it moved, see if the figure of Jesus moved. And it never happened. And then I came here, and over the years, I've realized that no. This concept of God for me is built of moments of a conscious contact with God. It doesn't happen all the time. It just happens in moments. It happens in moments where my child is being born, or when I held my sister's hand when she passed away, or when I hear a speaker and it just connects with me deep, or when we hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer together. Those are moments where I can experience that presence of God. And I'll tell you what, I know there were some people that were newer with us this evening, and I can't promise you what will happen in your life. I can tell you this, that my life has been filled with every kind of experience you can imagine in these past 40 plus years. Everything. Wonderful things, challenging things, the passing of loved ones, you name it. I've experienced all of it. All of it. And what it's all amounted to is a meaningful life. And if you're new, if you just stay here and just do this the best you can, I don't know what will happen for you, but I can promise you this. If you just try to work these 12 steps to the best of your ability, you'll find a meaningful life here too. Thank you.